You guys are all pretty familiar with some of the concepts that I'm talking about tonight. So it's more the framework that you might be interested in. And my talk is mostly about the future of the mind in relationship to the digital society. And I thought I'd start off with a little quote here from Tim Ferriss, who some of you might know. And basically, he's expressing some dissatisfaction with how his own identity and relationship to the internet or to his online life, especially on some of the platforms. He says, "I'm firmly in the camp that believes technology is generally bending the world in a positive direction. Yet for me, Twitter foments neurosis, Facebook sadness, Google News a sense of foreboding, Instagram turns me covetous. All of them make me want to do it, whatever it may be. For the likes, the comments, I can't help but feel that I am the worst version of myself, being performative on a very short, very depressing timeline, a timeline of seconds." And you realize the relevance of this as I go on. So my topic is actually cultivating something called digital wisdom in the age of, well, the talk is called In the Age of Digital Dumbness. Okay. I'm going to go through some parts fairly quickly because, as usual, I've made too many slides for a short presentation. This is what I always do. But you'll notice that I'm going to quickly introduce myself and my discipline very, very quickly. And then I'm going to move on to the context and three domains of what I call digital wisdom. And at the end, which I'm almost certainly not going to have time for, but if I do, I'll mention a few simple tools that can be used to develop digital wisdom. Okay, so basically I'm in Zhuhai, which is in southern China, not far from Hong Kong. And I'm an associate professor of foresight and strategy here at Beijing Institute of Technology, which is a campus here in Zhuhai. It's nowhere near Beijing, in case you're wondering. And I teach courses like sense making in the digital society. I missed an important one there, which is artificial intelligence and the future of the mind. And I'm pretty lucky to be able to teach those here. And some people ask me, how can you teach things like sense making in the digital society in an authoritarian country? Well, you can, as long as you skirt around the boundaries. So Zhuhai is a coastal city, very nice place if you ever want to visit here. And this is part of my project called Power and Presence. The basic idea of this project is to try to work out how can we develop a sense of empowerment or agency in the modern world, especially in relationship to the media, okay, or digital media. And this is very closely related to the idea of consciousness, because I believe that consciousness develops in relationship to all things, and just in the modern age doesn't mean that we're no longer in relationship with the world in a similar way to what some of the ancient mystics talked about. Okay. So critical future studies is the discipline that I'm in. It's basically trying to deepen our relationship with the future or the way that we think about it. It's not just about prediction. And there are 6 pillars to future studies as I work with it. And now the number 4 there, the deepening part, is really what I do in my future studies work. This means asking deeper questions, including what are some alternative futures, or how can we transform the present into the future, into a future that we want. Okay. And there's a concept that I will quickly go through, deep futures versus money and machines futures. This is not central to my argument, so I'll just very quickly mention what they are. So my essential argument is that the world that we live in at the moment is primarily a money and machines futures, and we're moving more into a more conscious awareness of who we are as a species. So basically, in a money and machines futures, it's hyper-capitalism, but it's transposed onto the internet or the world of online experience. And there tends to be a lack of psycho-spiritual awareness as in our relationship with the internet and the media and the technologies that we use. Now, deep futures, and again, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but again, it's kind of the opposite, that it's a framework of thinking about how we can deepen our relationship both with technology and with each other and with the world, and especially deepen in terms of our embodiment or presence. And this can be done in relationship with technology, is what I'm going to argue. So this includes psycho-spiritual perspectives. Okay, a few very important definitions. So what is digital wisdom as I define it? So it's basically the conscious navigation of virtual spaces. Okay, this is where consciousness comes into it, or the mind. And it's via inculcation of increased awareness of three important domains of cognition. So the first part is knowing yourself. This is really where the consciousness component comes in. And the second part is know the humans. That's about understanding our biological or neurophysiological dimension. And the third part is knowing the machines, which is our relationship with technology. The basic idea of this is that we can teach this digital wisdom to people or develop it consciously such that we teach people, especially young people, I would hope, how to relate to technology in a way which makes them more conscious and more aware and less susceptible to manipulation by online bad faith actors, or just all of us, because all of us are unconscious in some ways. And I define digital wisdom as one of the 5 pillars of the authentic self. Okay, so what is the authentic self? Well, it's a wiser, or more present, or more grounded expression of ourselves than typically experienced by most people today. So it's very much related to the idea of presence, or being present in the body. And wisdom is, I think, a natural expression of being present and not being too much in the head. Now, the authentic self is not incompatible, I don't think, with the concept of selflessness, or perhaps, or non-self in the awakening traditions. I believe that there's a felt sense of self that we have, an intuitive sense. And if we're open to it, it guides us through life. Now, Gabor Mate has also used this idea of the authentic self. I don't know if you know who he is. He wrote a book, I think, called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. And he was interested in trauma as a doorway to authenticity and wisdom. And so the way he uses the term is quite similar to mine, in the sense that it's our feelings and our relationship to them which can deepen our understanding of self and consciousness. And so embodied presence is the mindful relaxation into the present moment. Okay, another key component I talk about is cognitive responsibility. This is basically being able to witness the realm of thought and the realm of mind as it emerges. So it's being the witness. And this, again, is a very important part of many traditional enlightenment and awakening traditions, especially Buddhism, and it's also in the Taoist traditions and many of the introspective traditions. But it's also about being responsible for what emerges from the mind, rather than projecting it out into the world. So the authentic self, as I put it, has actually 5 pillars or bases. So digital wisdom, if you look at it on the left-hand side in the yellow, is part of what I call mastery of the system. So it's teaching people, or developing within ourselves, a mastery of modern societies, including the digital society. Okay. Wise actions is the actions that emerge from our own wisdom. Integrated intelligence, I'm just moving around the circle here, is basically the intuitive mind imbued with the non-local mind, which I've talked a lot about, but I can't really go into it in detail in this session. Cognitive responsibility I just talked about, and embodied presence. So these are really the pillars that go up to make what I call the authentic self. And so what is the context of my talk? So I'm going to introduce the idea of digital wisdom, how it can be part of a broader psychological and spiritual transformation. And this is more to do with psychological or spiritual maturity, but not necessarily non-dual states of consciousness, although I don't think it's incompatible with those either. And this is a perspectival presentation. So it's really about how can we frame this in the modern context of what's happening in society at the moment. Okay. So there's been a lot of bad press about the internet, Web 2.0, which is basically a web in relationship to capitalism. And so the idea of surveillance capitalism, which was put forward by Shoshana Zuboff, is that big tech is basically taking control of society. And I think the problem is, for me, is basically that our authentic selves tend to be subsumed by online, we're captured by the value structures and the narratives that are inherent in the surveillance capitalism or Web 2.0, if you want to think of it that way. But I think these technologies are not incompatible with technologies with the authentic self if we use them consciously. So how can we go about negotiating these online worlds and technological devices while facilitating wisdom and awakening, if you like? So how can we respectfully instill higher order consciousness structures in populations while avoiding some of the pitfalls of religious and moral and authoritarianism, which has always been a problem with ideal or utopian visions of the future. So I believe that digital wisdom could play a similar role to James Flynn. You might know James Flynn. He came up with the Flynn effect, which is the idea that intelligence, at least measured intelligence, has increased over the decades in IQ testing in populations. And his argument was that intelligence has increased because of these shorthand abstractions, ideas that have imbued the minds or consciousness of populations. I would use the term consciousness. Ideas like average, market, placebo, and so on, which we think has been perfectly normal, enables people to go about their lives and understand the world and how it functions in a smarter way. Of course, there's an argument people are not really smarter, but I won't go into that. Measured intelligence has, up to recently, definitely increased. So perhaps we can take this idea that conceptions and understanding and skills can create a increased intelligence of a certain sort, which is related to the mind and the way we employ it intuitively and with awareness and mindfulness and wisdom in the modern age. Okay, so I think we have an opportunity at this point to cultivate this kind of capacity. Okay, and one of my main points also is that I don't think we can just let young people go about their lives and expect that they will be able to navigate these spaces just by themselves. So it's up to us as older adults to be able to develop some capacity for digital wisdom and then to teach it to others. But we have to be able to embody it ourselves. One thing I've noticed, even within well-educated cultures and societies like ours and university cultures, that there's a lot of people get caught up in these online spaces and they tend to lose themselves into it, including some quite notable people in the consciousness community I've noticed who just get caught up in it. And so my point is, it's up to us to learn how to embody it and navigate our way through it and not get caught up in the machinations of online worlds. Okay. So this is, I think, one of the fundamental processes that we really have to decide. How are we going to develop ourselves, perhaps to create a Web 3.0, which is closer to the human spirit. Okay, so one way we can do this, we can think of what we see and experience in the online world as an expression of ego, okay, or mind, if you like. So that grants us an opportunity to experience the mind or ego in other people and to observe it without judgment and to understand that is us, because as Leonard Jacobson, who is one of my major teachers, said that there really is only one ego. So when we see it in other people or in other tribal entities on the internet, we're really seeing ourselves. So we can deepen into awareness of our own ego as we observe the judgments in ourselves and in other people. And I believe that we can deepen into a process of presence even while using the internet. Depends where you go though, maybe not on Twitter. Okay, so in the awakening traditions, at least some of them, it was about developing the right relationship, okay, or conscious relationship with the world, with the world of thought, feelings, with others, and the physical world. So the digital world can also be used in a similar way. So what are the three components of digital wisdom? Know thyself, know the human, and know machines, as I mentioned. So I'm going to very quickly go through this because I've only got about 5 minutes left. Okay, well, so what do I mean by know thyself? So it's understanding really how the mind functions practically, especially in relationship with technologies. It includes being conscious of trigger points. So when we are in online spaces, we can notice if we're triggered by something. We can also do shadow work. We can learn through our own responses to what other people say and do, what our own particular issues, psychological issues, and our trauma are through mindfulness processes. Unfortunately, I can't really go through some of the processes in detail in this presentation, but basically, some of the most powerful ones are things like noticing processes, which are a big part of Western traditions. There's been a lot of work done on that in universities, where you just notice what is in your body, and you, instead of judging it, you just be present with it. And this can actually develop a deeper sense of presence, such that the mind or the emotional body doesn't control our behavior, but there's a higher order process or observer that comes into place. And this facilitates a greater degree of cognitive responsibility. Okay, so know the humans. So this is really about understanding how humans function in terms of their cognitive functions, their neurophysiology, and especially cultures in online contexts. So the idea is we try to understand or better understand human biology and culture, okay, including some positive and negative human traits that as they function. Because remember, there's lots of positive things happening as well on the internet. Being able to take things less personally. Because if we understand the nature of the mind or the body and how humans function, then I think we should be able to take things less personally and judge people less, even when they become caught up in online madness or get caught in perhaps unhealthy web systems. Now, bad faith. Now, there's a few different processes that I think people should be aware of. The concept of bad faith actors, for example. Now, my argument is that there's no simple dichotomy between bad faith actors and good faith actors. We're all bad faith actors and good faith actors because of human bias and unconsciousness, and we're all unconscious at some times. And we're all driven sometimes by the shadow, if you like. So shadow work can help us understand the process of at least some bad faith actors. So what I'm suggesting here is that an understanding of the concept of bad faith actors can help people navigate their way through the internet. Understanding confrontational binaries and tribalism is also very important. How do people unite? Tribalism is normally defined by a threat of a foreign entity. Okay, so it's important when we understand that we're getting caught up in a tribe. These are things that are pretty well talked about and known. Cognitive bias and dissonance are other concepts that I think most of you here will know about. But it's, a lot of young people don't necessarily know what cognitive dissonance is and why we might deny something within ourselves because our self-image is threatened by it. Negativity bias, I think, is also a very important concept that we can understand because a lot of the internet is driven by clickbaiting, which taps into a negativity bias that we have. We remember bad things. We're basically programmed to be neurotic, if you like, or to scan for threats. A basic understanding of this, I think, can make people more digitally wise. Fundamental attribution error also is an important thing. We tend to see others' faults in terms of their own badness, so their innate and their qualities. While we see our own faults, we tend to see them as a function of context. And this includes in the tribal context as well. The other tribe are bad because they're bad. Oh, when our guys do something wrong, it's someone else's fault or because of the context. Okay, so I'm kind of running out of time here. A contagion effect is another important thing, I think. There's some interesting studies done, such as the Framingham Heart study, which suggests that just hanging around people that are positive or negative can affect people's level of positivity and negativity over time. And some online platforms, including Facebook, have actually exploited this consciously to try to make populations happier or sadder in order to exploit them for advertising, basically. This is obviously not very, I'm just trying to turn my phone off here. Okay, so let me turn this off. Okay, so very quickly, the last part would be knowing the machine. This is, let's spend 1 minute on this part. So this is having a basic understanding of how the internet functions. You don't really need to have an understanding of coding or any particular strong understanding, I don't think. An understanding of how misinformation and disinformation functions, that's of course could be an entire book in itself. But these are very important concepts to understand. Misinformation is unconscious. Disinformation is conscious and deliberate. Echo chambers, which are something most of us are understanding or talking about these days. Algorithmic behavior and information news feeds. If we understand that we can get caught up in echo chambers as a result of those, I think it can really help us. Surveillance capitalism is also an interesting idea. So we understand that tech giants, their model of basically divide and advertise is a rather toxic one, and we should be thinking about how to develop deep futures beyond this. Maybe I'll just end with this one because it's a slightly disturbing one. Audience capture, and I just use an example here of a fellow online. His name is his avatar is Avocado, and he started off 6 years ago, and he was 170 pounds, and he tested food, and over a period of time, he ballooned up to 450 pounds.
We'll see you tomorrow night, by the way.
Because he wanted to get the likes from his audience. There's a classic case of audience capture. So these are the kinds of things that are necessary for, I think, to navigate your way through the internet. So I won't go any further because the tools part, as I said, I'm not going to get through tonight. But I've got a PDF. If anyone wants to look at that, I can send it to them through PDF. And so thank you for listening to my presentation, and I'll be happy to hear any questions if we have time.
Hey, Jeffrey, I think you're muted.
I can actually post the PDF right here. It'd be quite easy if people want to have a look at the PDF.
All right, yep, we still have some more time. So we've got a few minutes for questions. You can feel free to raise your hand, or you can just type them in.
This is like my university students here in China. Can't get a hand raised. So I'm going to just upload the PDF version of this if people would like to have a look at it.
Okay, looks like we have a question from Lauren Brown.
Thank you. And thank you, Professor, for your lecture as well. In that last slide you mentioned non-judgment of self and others is crucial, but in a non-discerning attitude. Are there tools or practices that you're familiar with or suggest to get you to that place where you have that non-judgment, but yet in a non-discerning attitude? It sounds like that would be kind of a skill set.
Yeah, I think it's just a practice set. I mean, people who practice meditation and observe the mind and its reaction, I think will be better at this. I would definitely recommend that people develop a meditation or mindfulness practice that would make it easier. For example, noticing a process. So meditating and then just noticing what's moving through the mind, for example. And this can be particularly useful when you're not feeling good about something. But what I do every day, almost every day, maybe probably 3 or 4 times a week, is when I wake up in the morning, I sit down and I go to a private room and I just allow my stream of consciousness to express itself. If there's any discomfort or I'm feeling angry or sad or fearful, I just allow it a voice and observe it without judgment. And one of the good things about that is if you give it an expression, it tends to lose its power. Of course, there may be something behind anger, for example. There might be an issue that you're having with somebody which you might need to look at. But the mindfulness process is quite simple. You just observe it. Now, if you can do that with yourself, you can also do that when you're online, as long as it's that second, the moment of agency, as I call it. So when you notice that this is, if there's anger or judgment, and you want to, like, if you're on Twitter or somewhere like that, I mean, that place is a magnet for this kind of stuff. Before you post anything, you just become present with the feeling. So instead of identifying with a thought, you move into the body and acknowledge the feelings that are in the body, and just wait for a moment, and then we'll just tend to integrate. That is my experience. So these are noticing processes that are quite common to awakening traditions, and they've been practiced in many universities. Well, there's quite a lot of research behind it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're very tight on time, but Lauren, you raised your hand. Of course, we've got to call on you. It's so great to see you and hear from you. So a quick question.
You too,
Marcus,
everybody.
time is of the essence on your answer for this one.
Okay, very quickly, but I'll post the PDF here. I've developed some of my own processes.
Oh, hang on a second, Marcus. Let's let Lauren ask her question real quick. I was just saying, answer her real quick.
Yeah.
Just quickly, what do you think about the OpenAI new chatbot GMT and how that will affect humanity?
Can you repeat that question? I didn't quite understand it.
So the OpenAI chat GPT platform, which is writing and reading and having basically conversational abilities. What do you think about that and how that will impact young people?
I'm not really familiar with that. Are you talking about
Education
something?
also.
I'm not actually familiar with that.
Yeah. Okay. They just launched it in November, the end of November, and it's hit the young folks by storm, and they're writing, they're using it to write text. And it's so it feels and looks very authentic, but and fooling a lot of people.
Yes. Yeah, I know
AI
about that.
in general. AI in general, yeah.
Yes. Very quickly, I would just say that you just have to be a bit careful we don't give our power away, I think, to the systems. But it can also be a great advantage as well. I mean, some of these AI systems with creativity can really help people to express themselves in a very creative way. But time will tell how some of the problems, all these technologies have unintended effects. And I haven't reflected on that enough to think about what it would do. My only issue would be to spend some time at least offline so that we can keep in contact with ourselves. We don't give our power away to a machine. That's what
Okay, Marcus.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. Lots of great comments in the chat. We really appreciate it.